All right, good afternoon, everyone. We're so happy you could join us here at Unscripted. Today's session, we're going to talk with Jason Jones, who is a graduate of the program The Last Mile. So Jason, welcome. Can you introduce yourself for us, please?
Yes, my name is Jason Jones. I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me. I currently am the remote instruction manager at The Last Mile.
Awesome, thank you so much. And I'm Heidi Newiger. I'm your host here from Harness today. We're going to be learning about Jason's story. So with that, let's cut over to a video so we can see what the last program is all about.
When I was young, technology wasn't really around. So I never thought of having a job in tech. That was never a goal. But when I started learning coding, I started seeing the power that existed and the reach that coding has. From that point on, I was hooked. Well, my name is Jason. I do coding. I'm a software engineer. A lot of people always say, like, you don't look like a software engineer. And I love that, right? Because typically I don't right now. How many people know somebody in prison, incarcerated? It's the majority of people. And how many of you guys know somebody that's a coder? I learned to code in prison. I've been out for about 2 months now. I spent the last 13 and a half years in prison. Where I'm from, you don't see nobody having tech jobs. You don't see nobody going to no 9 to 5 or anything like that. What you do see, though, is a chaotic environment where people are coming in and out of prison. I joined the gang at 11 years old. I thought the life that I was living was normal because everybody around me was doing the same thing. The first positive influence I had was a football coach. That's where I poured all my pain, my passion, my anger. I received Division I scholarships. However, I didn't make the grades. I wasn't prepared for the SATs, and when all those opportunities were taken away, I went right back doing the same things and went right back into the same life. In 2006, I was sentenced to 14 years in prison. If it wasn't for The Last Mile, honestly, I don't know where I would be. It helped me reimagine what my life could be and the possibilities.
When we first started The Last Mile, we decided that it was vitally important to provide marketable skills to those who are incarcerated so when they return to society, they have the ability to be successful and not reoffend.
Over the course of 2 years, Google.org will donate $2 million to help The Last Mile expand its reach, helping people to build the skills that they need to succeed.
With Google's support, we're not only expanding our curriculum. In the next 5 years, we want to be in 50 classrooms, but we don't want to stop there. We really believe that this will change the nature of incarceration in America and hopefully in the world.
Over a 2-year period, The Last Mile will educate and certify 525 youth, women, and men in a variety of skills, including front-end software engineering, entrepreneurship, web and mobile app development, design, and QA.
We're basically getting feedback from our Googlers with their expertise and talent in coding and also in curriculum development ourselves and providing that feedback to The Last Mile so that they could really appeal to
Google software engineers, program managers, and user experience researchers are working with The Last Mile to adapt its coding program and make it work for young people. They're also working to create a virtual lecture series so that program participants have direct access to technologists in the sector.
You guys like problem solving? Do you guys like logic thinking? One of the first things I did after getting out was start a program at a local high school to share my knowledge about computer science with youth who are not incarcerated. If they don't see coding as an option, they're not going to choose it. And they're coming from the same conditions I came from. And if I can learn it inside of prison where there's no internet access, right? Y'all can too. I'm doing things that I never thought I would do in life. I have real goals now. I'm not defined by my crime or by the fact that I dropped out of college. I'm a software engineer who's proficient in JavaScript, PHP, Ruby, React, Jekyll, and I work at a tech company in San Francisco. It feels good, the fact that my son is actually proud of me. It's time for me to help my community and help break this cycle of incarceration. And yeah, it's a lot of work to be done, but I'm hopeful.
All right, Jason, thank you so much for being so open and vulnerable and sharing your story. I think it's so valuable for everyone to have kind of that insight into what your life was like and what experiences you've had. And I think you're right. It really does give us a lot of hope for the future about what is possible. I'd like to rewind just a bit and hear a little bit more about, it's clear the last mile program changed your life. And I'd love to understand a little bit more about your experience in San Quentin.
Definitely. So before I got to San Quentin, when I went to prison, the first prison I went to was Pelican Bay, and I was 19 years old. Pelican Bay is a level 4, and how it's structured. You have 4 levels, 4 and 3 being maximum security, 2 and 1 being minimum security. They sent me to Pelican Bay, and very early on, what I've seen in that environment really shaped how I decided to do my time inside. And in particular, it was one incident where 2 people was fighting, and someone, the officer shot. You see signs and you see things on the wall where it says no warning shots, and the officer shot and ended up shooting and killing an elder black man that wasn't even in the altercation. He was just standing by, right? So that like seeing that really shaped how I was going to do my time. So going like almost a decade later into my sentence, when I finally got to San Quentin, which is a level 2, I just wasn't prepared for San Quentin, right? San Quentin was a lot more open than higher levels. It had a lot more programs, everything. So when I got to San Quentin in 2013, I really struggled the programming for like the first 10 months. I was on C status, which is a disciplinary action for behavior reasons, and they confine you in the cell for about 22 hours a day, Monday through Friday. You don't get the weekends or holidays or anything like that. So that was kind of like my introduction to San Quentin, and seeing all the different volunteers, the programs. I just wasn't prepared for it because I was so institutionalized at the time, right? Now, what happened with me getting into the last mile was once I got out of off of C status and completed that 10 months, a couple of friends, some elder men in there that was my mentor, kind of told me about the last mile. Like, look, this is something that you should get into. It'll keep you out of trouble, and at the time, the last mile was an entrepreneur program, right? They haven't started the coding program to 2014. So this is early 2014. And I always felt like a natural entrepreneur because honestly, like all my life growing up, where I grew up, like I sold drugs most of my life in my past. And then, so I felt like I had the traits of an entrepreneur, but I really lacked the understanding of business. So I really wanted to go to join the entrepreneur program. I applied, did the interview, felt like it went great, did not get accepted, right? And I was really like kind of crushing. They put a chip on my shoulder, to be honest. And I felt like I deserved the opportunity, all these things, right? They didn't accept me because I had my disciplinary history was pretty fresh. I had fresh write-ups not too long ago, and they have a 0 tolerance policy. They told me to do a year clean, come back and apply. So I was like, whatever. At that time, I kind of like just threw the towel in and was like, man, I'm not going to apply again, whatever. A week later, Beverly Parenze, one of the co-founders, had sent someone to my cell and told me to fill out this application to get into the coding program because they're going to start a coding program. At the time, I did not know what coding was at all. So I filled out the application anyway, just because a friend told me to fill it out. I went down there to talk to her. She introduced me to the instructor that's going to be in there. She's like, yeah, this is your boss. when we got to put you in coding, and I think that you'll like it. And I was like, well, what is coding? They was like, oh, well, you'll be on the computer, you'll learn how to build websites, applications and stuff. And so at that time, I honestly thought I was going to go back there and play solitary on the computer for like 2 months and quit. I did not think I would ever get coding because it just seemed really foreign. I didn't know nobody growing up that did coding. I never seen nobody that looked like me that did coding or anything like that. So I went back there, and I remember the first day back there, it started October 6, 2014. It actually started on my birthday. Still the best birthday present I ever had. And they told us on the first day to pair up with someone that we don't know in the class and build a website by the end of the week. And I was like, man, how are we going to do that? Right. So we did it. We ended up completing it. And I thought the website we built was like really, really great. And looking back, reflecting in retrospect, it was like so 1980s or 1990s. It was so bad, but it was like something that I really fell in love with once I seen, like, you could take what's in your mind, how you visualize, how you see the world, and then interpret it in a way, with a computer language to show everyone else, right? And I really thought that was really powerful. So that kind of like got me bought into the last mile.
That's awesome. I love how positive you are when you talk about it. Your best birthday present yet, and just like the evolution of Jason coming from, San Quentin, Pelican Bay Pelican Bay, San Quentin to this coder, right? Who's able to really see a future and a life outside of the life you knew. And in the video, you even say, like, I don't look like a software engineer, but I am, kind of breaking that stereotype. And that's so important. And so I know now today you've, since that video was filmed, you no longer work at that tech company. You actually work for The Last Mile, and you instruct students, youths and women and men, kind of to follow your shoes. And I'd love to hear just a little bit, if you would be willing to describe what that program looks like, what the classwork looks like, and what your relationship is with those students.
Definitely. I do want to give a quick shout out to Fandom, the company that did come in, and they actually offered me a contract with them 3 weeks before actually I came home. So I signed it while I was in prison, and they still the only tech company to do that. So I really want to give a shout out, big ups to them. I really loved working in tech. It was cool. I learned a lot, but it wasn't something I was fully passionate about. Like, I wasn't working on something I was really passionate about. I was working on a piece of software that I essentially didn't really use, right? So it was a natural fit to come back and teach coding, because I really love education. I really love be able to bring opportunity, or be able to help people see opportunity, right? So it was a natural fit coming back to The Last Mile. And now our program model kind of changed, where before it was real static. We had a learning management system, and it was kind of like, if your facilitator had a coding background, that was a bonus. But most of our facilitators didn't have a coding background, so they was just like a resource for us to like bounce things or ideas, and they can Google something and then tell us some kind of information or to help us understand a specific concept or something. So when I came back, what I wanted to do, which started out as me wanting to mentor the youth. When I went out to Indiana, I met the youth shortly after I got out. And I understood from being in their same shoes when I was young, that the best thing that you can give anybody young is consistency. And I didn't want to be a person that just entered their life, made a connection, and then they never see me again. So I asked the warden at that time in Indiana if I'm able to call back in. Like, can I do Google Hangouts with them? Can I just talk to them, mentor them, teach them? And they said yes. So every Friday morning from my bedroom, before I went to work at Fandom, I'll call in for about an hour and just teach them, mentor them. And the results was really great. The Last Mile, the co-founders, Chris Redlitz, called me and was like, well, look, can you do this for all the programs? Can you do this for all of our classrooms, right? At the time, we had 2 programs in Indiana, and then we had 4 in California. Once we added this component of virtual connection, where I was able to teach, we scaled to 23 classrooms in less than a year, right? And it was with, like I said, men, women, and youth. And it was really great being able to call in and teach. And it was coming from a perspective of understanding the environment, understanding what it means to code without the internet, understanding what restrictions you have, how small that box is that you have to think outside of, right? And also dealing with the not only the social pressures inside, but also like the politics, right? Like being able to navigate that to stay focused on the opportunity and take advantage of it, right? So now our program is a year-long program that's split up into 2 courses, 6 months each. One is web dev fundamentals. The second course is full stack MERN development. And then we have another component that we're working on with reentry, because now we got a reentry department, and we're going to start with helping people design their reentry plan first day in our program, and don't wait till after they get out, which is really important.
That's so important. It sounds like throughout your experience, you had a lot of mentors who were able to really help and shape you, and that is what your life is now, your work is dedicated to, right? Helping all of these other folks. And again, thank you for sharing your story. I think it's such a positive story, and it's so important for people to hear those types of stories. And the fact is we just don't, right? And so this is an opportunity for all of us listening along to really understand a different set of experiences that we don't necessarily have connection to, right? And we talked about this a little bit when we first connected, but you are one of thousands, literally thousands of other people's stories, and we don't see and hear all of those success stories. And so it's hard sometimes for people to connect and really have like mass incarceration and the ramifications of that resonate with us, right? I'd love to take a minute just to hear from you about mass incarceration. And I know that this is a huge and deep topic, and I don't want to get too down the wormhole, but can you talk about mass incarceration and why it's so dangerous?
Yeah, definitely. I feel like a lot of times mass incarceration is like a buzzword in certain settings, right? I think a lot of people don't understand the depth and how dangerous, like you said, mass incarceration is. I like to frame it as this is America's version of the Holocaust, right? And I think if people really thought about that, because everybody can agree that the Holocaust was something really horrible that should never have happened.
Right.
But when you say mass incarceration, people think people incarcerated just deserves all these conditions, not understanding the conditions that's in there, right? And that's why it's so dangerous, is because it's the dangerous part about the disconnect that the community outside and the community inside have is that it's a wall of invisibility. It's like nobody knows what goes on in prison. Nobody knows what the conditions look like. Nobody knows what the food looks like. No one knows what it's like to be stuck in a cell for however long or whatever it may be. And then it's another component where you constantly dehumanize and condition to be less than a human, right? Like the first thing they do when you go to prison is have you sign your death certificate, right? That's the very first thing. After they strip you naked and everything in front of everybody, they have you sign your death certificate, right? And then give you a number, right? So now your identity and everything completely changed, and they give you a number. This is what a CDC card looked like. I still carry mine everywhere I go, right? And they give you a number, and you just judge by that number for the rest of your life, essentially, right? And that's why it's so dangerous, because we live in a society right now where people associate law as being correct,
Right.
And not too long ago, in the grand scheme of things, slavery was law. That doesn't make it right. That don't make it correct, right? So when you talk about mass incarceration and why is it so dangerous, you have to understand, like, the numbers statistically, Black and brown communities are being torn apart, the family structures, and people that is in position to maintain this system of systemic racism and oppression are making money, generational wealth off the backs and the ideal of breaking up these family structures for generations. That's why it's dangerous.
Yeah, I'm going to share some facts in case our audience isn't sure or doesn't know, but incarceration in the United States is the primary form of punishment and rehabilitation. And it's unfortunately a for-profit system. So the rehabilitation is definitely an afterthought, right? Which is why programs like the Last Mile are so important. And I'd also be remiss not to mention that the prison system and mass incarceration affects Black, Indigenous, and people of color at a disproportionate rate than it affects white people, right? And so it's really deepening the disadvantages that these already marginalized groups in society have. And so I think, what's so important, and you just mentioned a little bit about this in humanizing the experience, right, is making sure that even from a language perspective, right, instead of saying prisoners, we say incarcerated. Yeah. Is there anything else you have to add about the importance of humanizing the incarcerated persons and how that can affect change?
Yeah, definitely. I think psychologically, it's really deeply rooted when you constantly hearing all these negative labels to identify yourself, right? Convict, felon, offender, whatever it may be, right? To the point where like even the culture inside of prison, even I was part of this at one point where I was like, I'm not an inmate, I'm a convict, right? And no, I'm not. You know, I mean, I'm a father, I'm a son, I'm a software engineer. Like, no, I'm not. I'm none of that, right? That I believed I was at one point. But you hear so much that you start to internalize it. And once you internalize a label or something negative, you internalize the connotation that come with it, and then your behavior reflects it, right? And that's why it's so important to start humanizing someone. Just the same as now I make it really intentional when I see someone, especially a young Black man or sister that may be tall or may look like an athlete. I don't say that off the jump, like, oh, you look like you play basketball. No, you look like a scientist. You look like a lawyer. You look like you can change the world, right? Because you want them to start internalizing that and condition them that it's way more options than what you think there are, right? And so if you're constantly dehumanizing someone, calling them a felon, a convict, or they don't think they can be anything else, right? Even though if they want to be, they feel like society already gave up on them. So eventually you give up on yourself and you lose that hope, right? And that's why it's so important to, like, even when you think about language, even think you with language, you shift the paradigm. Like I said, if people stop using mass incarceration and say like, this is America's Holocaust, a lot of people is going to get upset with that because it's going to help them understand how deeply rooted this horrible statistic is, because that's what mass incarceration now has been, I feel like, being trimmed down as just like statistic, 2.3 million people incarcerated. But the numbers doesn't say like how many Black and brown communities are really, it doesn't highlight the discrepancies, right? It just masks it, right? And I think that's the same thing when you say felon. What does that mean, right? What does criminal mean? What does crime mean, right? Because a couple of years ago, a criminal could have been considered someone that just wanted to smoke marijuana, wanted to, you know what I mean, which is legalized now. So what is crime and what is all these buzz terms that we're using to define people?
Totally. I think you bring up a ton of really great points, and it's so important to be really mindful of the language that we're using and how it predicts our reality, right? So thank you for sharing that. I think programs like the Last Mile are great because they focus on rehabilitation and reentry, and they give you these positive labels that you're able to, instead of having those labels, felon, convict, troublemaker, whatever they are, giving yourself software engineer, the ability to focus on different parts of yourself and really create that new life for yourself and see pathways that may not have existed before. Can you talk a little bit about how programs like this, rehabilitation programs, are so impactful, and kind of what you see the Last Mile opportunity to be if this program continues to expand? You said it went from like 5 or 6 a few years ago to over 20 today. What does that future look like for you?
Yeah, one thing I think I want to point out when it comes to rehabilitation programs inside of an incarcerated setting is the contrast between let's just take California. California, literally, CDCR is the 3rd largest law enforcement in the United States, right? It's Custom Border Patrol, New York City Police Department, then CDCR. They got 29,000 employees with a $12 billion annual budget that they don't even have to lobby for, right? Now, in the last 10 years, their recidivism rate have been over 50%. And you take that same 10-year span for the last mile, right? Which is about 24 employees, half is formerly incarcerated. It's a nonprofit, and we have a 0% recidivism rate, right? And this is why I say, like, when you think, just think of number-wise and impact when it comes to rehabilitation programs, right? On a national scale, recidivism is about almost 70%. You drop it 1%, you save billions of dollars that goes back into communities that really need it, goes back into healthcare, goes back into education, right? So that's one of the reasons why rehabilitation programs is really important. The other reason for people that's incarcerated is that, like you said, it's humanized, it's human, right? I remember when I was inside, and the first time I went outside, when they took me to the doctor to get my wisdom teeth pulled in San Francisco, the nurse was calling me by my first name. And I didn't respond because I didn't know she was talking to me, right? And I was that institutionalized to hear either my last name or my number that I didn't know that she was talking to me. And so now thinking about that and knowing that and having that experience, one thing that I know across the org that we do is always address people by their first name, right? Just to humanize them. And it's funny because I was like this too at one point when someone said my first name, like, oh, don't call me by my government, right? And then I have to like kind of reframe things like, well, that's not your government. The government actually gave you a number. That's the name your mama gave you. That's the name your parents gave you, right? And then once that set in, they started to understand like, oh yeah, so now I'm living this identity that the state gave me because I don't want to live the identity that my parents gave me, right? So that's why it's so important. Just small things like that helps with the rehabilitation, the healing for people that is incarcerated, and show them that they so much more and they can be so much more than their current situation.
Totally. It's so important. It's so easy to do things like call somebody by their first name, you know? We're all humans. We all have the same, we eat the same food, we drink the same water, we need the same things to stay alive.
Yeah.
So obviously this program changed your life. We've talked about that. Can you share some specifics of what this program means to you?
Man, this program definitely changed my life, but not just my life, my whole family structure, like gave my kids a chance to have opportunity, to have access, right? I'm still on parole, right? I got out September 25th, 2018. I'm still on parole. And in less than 2 years, I was able to buy a home, right? And literally in less than 2 years, I went from state property to owning property in the state. And I think that right there alone is really powerful, right? Because now I know, like, my kids always have a home, something I never had. I grew up in foster care, so that's something I never had, right? And this is just like one of the small things that is like a benefit of taking advantage of this opportunity. It's other people in our program that did the same thing. Women that's coming home from incarceration, they deal with a whole new set of problems that some people that's coming home from incarceration doesn't have to deal with. For instance, most women, about 70% of women that's incarcerated are mothers also, right? And when they come home, their kids usually are living with them, or they're living with their kids, and they have to deal with going to find a job, finding a babysitter, and everything else. Our women are getting out, working for tech companies from home and being able to be a stay-at-home mother, right? And still be there with their kids, spend time with their kids, and work, and now becoming a role model to their kids, and their kids being able to see, oh, look what mom's doing. This is her work and everything, getting people interested. Another thing this opportunity did for me was, as soon as I came back to the community, it made me an immediate resource, right? It's really hard to tell anybody that's living in a disadvantaged, underserved community to put a gun down or put drugs down without putting something in their hand to replace it, right? And here I am being able to come in to communities in West Oakland and San Francisco and Santa Rosa, all these different communities that really need a lot of help, and show them that it's other pathways than just entertainment or sports. But I went to my clients and started a coding program there. The first thing the students said was like, you don't look like a coder. You don't look like a software engineer. Yeah. I'm like, that's great. Let's change that. Because if you don't think I look like one, you don't think yourself look like one, and you don't think this is an option, right? The same way I said early on, I didn't see coders growing up or anything like that. So why would I want to be? It's hard to be something you don't see.
100% representation is so important. And that's, I think, something that the tech community overall has been really, the conversation around that has been really picking up over the last few years, which is why when I learned about the last mile, I was so excited. It's such a great way to recreate what those images in your head could look like of a software engineer, of a doctor, of a business person.
Yeah.
So I know you have active students right now, and I know that they were hoping to join us, but due to COVID, we were unable to get them on the line. Can you share a bit about their journey and let us know what this program means to them and how it's changing their life from the inside before they come back out?
Yeah. I think the big part is that when they call home, the conversations with their family is totally different, right? They're able to not only become visible through our program because of media and stuff like that, doing interviews, all this stuff, but now they visible because to their family, like they're able to show their family what they're doing with the time, so people cannot focus on what they did to get the time. And I think that's a big mind shift and a paradigm shift for a lot of people. I literally have mothers in our classroom that call home and their kids like are starting to code because they know their mom or their dad is coding. And they're literally teaching their kids over a 15-minute collect call home, like breaking down subjects and concepts or whatnot, keeping them motivated, all these different things. And that is what's gonna, literally, that's what it's gonna take to move us closer to breaking this generational cycle of incarceration, right? Generational cycle of poverty, generational cycle of trauma, right? That's what it's gonna take for us to heal these family structures. And I think this is one way for our students to like really help their family heal and turn a negative situation into a positive.
Absolutely. So I know we're reaching the end of our conversation time today, but I have a couple more questions. So we saw in the video that, Google has been able to donate a ton of money and really help this program, which is excellent. It sounds like it's such an awesome opportunity for folks, and I'm so glad that it exists. But I know for me, at Harness, we have a lot fewer resources in terms of people, in terms of cash, and it feels unattainable to help out in that way. For folks here who are listening, who are inspired as I am, and want to help out or get involved, are there ways that individuals or small companies can give back or get involved with the last mile?
Definitely. An easy way that all it's going to take is time is just volunteer. Come be part of our community, right? Like it's a big emphasis on reentry when it comes to like housing and job placement, which is two strong pillars that need to be in place, right? But before that, community is so important, right? Especially for people that grew up in prison like myself, where that became my community, and now I'm being ripped again away from a community to a foreign society, and kind of finding my place and where I belong and how I identify in society was really challenging. And it took for a community to wrap around me for me to feel welcomed. So I think a very basic, very simple way to get involved is come join our community. And it might look like just mentoring someone that just came home, right? Helping them with their resume, helping them with their LinkedIn profile, or whatever it may be. If you want to volunteer and teach something to our students, we have the capability of doing that now, right? Where we literally have different volunteers or companies call in virtually to our classrooms and teach now, or hold space with them. And I tell people all the time, especially tech companies that really want to be on the forefront of diversity, come to our classroom. Proximity matters, right? Brian Stevenson talks about it all the time. Proximity matters. And so an easy way to get involved where it doesn't really cost too much, just time, is get proximate to our community. Become part of it.
Wonderful.
Yes.
Well, we will drop the link on how to get involved, and we hope that this has been impactful. Jason, I know that for me, I've learned so much for you. So thank you again for opening up and sharing your story with us. It's such an important story to share. And I'd like to close by saying again, thank you. And if there's any closing thoughts you have, please share them. But Thanks again.
Yes. The last closing thought I do want to say is I want to bring back again, and for our graduates, we have a 0% recidivism. Now, I don't think people understand the implication of that, right? When someone recidivate, well, first, it costs, in California alone, it costs about $70,000 to house one person without health issues. That's just a standard cost. If they have health issues, it costs a lot more, whether it's a physical health or mental health, right? But $70,000 is the baseline, right? For one person a year. Once that person, if that person ever recidivate, which right now it's close to 70% in California, so 7 out of 10 people almost recidivate, right? So many tax dollars are going towards keeping prison running, right? Now, we're able to have a 0% recidivism because we understand a lot of different things. We understand how to humanize, we understand how to receive people and welcome when they come home and the services they need. However, if, like I said, if we drop the recidivism just by 1%, it saves so much money that goes back into communities that need the money, that needs the resources. And then not only that, it doubled down by the people that's not going back to prison, actually going back into communities and changing the communities from the inside, right? If we really want to like have a just society, an equitable society, we have to lift from the bottom. And just so happen that the people that are forgotten is the ones that's at the bottom. You lift from the bottom, everybody else in society rises.
Yeah, 100%. I couldn't agree more. Thank you for taking the time to say that. And thank you again for your time today.
Thank you.